Oh shit. Am I late? What's the day? Oh fuck. This video was supposed to be out a week ago. Okay, you know what? No time for drink. We're not even gonna deal with that today. We're just gonna get right into the review. So today we'll be reviewing this board game. I don't really have time to introduce it or else this video is gonna be like 30 or 40 minutes long. So all the information is gonna be on screen right now that's like relevant to the game. Just know that I've had this game on my shelf for like 3 or 4 years and I use it to introduce people to slightly more complex social mechanics that are used in board games. So let's start off with the piece inspection. Everyone starts out with their own board that features what I feel are just caricature templates. However, I do think that it adds to the theme and I think that it's pretty stylized, so I really like it. You also get these really cool cloth bags that you'll be storing all of your goods in before you declare them. I will mention up front, this is the worst component in the game though. These bags have like a tiny little snapping button and they break more often than not. At least everybody who has a copy of this game has 1 to 2 broken pouches. They are seriously just notorious. I think they're great because it really adds the suspense of like opening up the bag, but come on. Besides just the bags, the only way you interact with the other players are pretty much just the deck of cards. Now, I need to talk about how many cards are in the game. How many do you think there are? 30? 100? Infinite? Well, mathematics has not come up with a word yet to accurately quantify just how many cards are in this goddamn game. I would guess it's probably somewhere over 200. I'm being serious though. To shuffle these cards properly, you need to spread them across the playing surface that you're playing on and just have all the cards go everywhere and then try and bring them back together into a pile. That is the only way. You're not going to ripple shuffle them. You can't do any of the bridge stuff. It's just not going to shuffle it enough. There are simply too many cards. The only surface that would be big enough for you to actually shuffle these would probably be like the surface of the sun. There are just that many cards, and I really can't get that point across enough. Not to mention that selecting cards is probably the most annoying, complicated rule that you'll have to learn to play this game. You always draw up to 5, and you can pick from the face-up piles, or you can pick from the face-down random pile in the middle. You can go from face-up to random, but you can't go from the random pile to the face-up pile. Before you select your cards, you are allowed to discard the cards that you don't want that you currently have in your hand. And where do you do that? Where's the discard pile? It doesn't really look like there's a discard pile here, does there? Well, that's because it's the face-up piles. You can dump the cards that you don't want into either or both of the face-up piles before you select your new cards. If you have a handful of useless cards, you can use it to sabotage one or both of the face-up piles if you're not interested in drawing from them. You can also look over and see that your fellow merchant is gunning for the title of King of Chickens and pick up the chickens cards so that they can't get them, or cover them up with the cards that you don't want so that they have to go through a bunch of cards before they can get to the chickens. This adds probably the only true difficulty to the game because the first time that you play this, it's going to be really confusing on how you can pick up cards and how you manage your hand. And unless you've played the game before watching this video, you probably didn't understand what I just said. You really do just have to play it for it to make sense. So the objective of the game is to get the most points by the time that everyone has been sheriff twice. How do you get points? Well, by doing your job as a merchant of the people, you must abide by all laws and pick cards to end up with the most of every good. It's okay in case you aren't the king or the queen of apples because each card you successfully get into your merchant stand gives you the points anyways. If you have the most, you're the king. If you have the second most, you're the queen, and you get bonus points at the end of the game. So diversifying is a good strat, but not always the best because you won't get any bonuses. Other than that, there are no other ways in Sheriff of Nottingham to get points. Okay, are they gone? Okay, let's talk about the good stuff. Well, you can technically sneak in illicit goods like pumpernickel instead of bread, or a rooster instead of just a chicken. Don't let the sheriff catch you though, because once every player has filled their bag with 2 to 5 cards, they hand it to the sheriff to inspect. When you declare what's in your bag, it has to be a legal good, only one kind of good, and you can't lie about the number of cards you have in the bag. You can lie about what's in the bag content-wise, but you can't lie about the number of cards. And trust me, you do not want to get caught lying to the sheriff about what's in your bag, because the sheriff gets points for everything that the sheriff finds that you didn't declare. So who the sheriff actually is changes from round to round, and once everyone has been the sheriff of Nut in My Ham twice, the game ends. This just leads to a lot of really crazy interactions, alliances, and betrayals, and that's where the game really shines. Let's say you didn't have a lot in your hand, or you just wanted some extra points, or you were really eyeballing that Granny Smith and didn't want to keep selling shitty Red Delicious apples. Well, the contraband that's indicated by all of the red frames, green frames are legal goods, are things you can't declare to the sheriff. So how do you get them past the sheriff? Well, I guess you could try and just sneak through and hope that the sheriff doesn't notice you. Or you could bribe them. So why wouldn't the sheriff of Green Pigs and Ham inspect every single bag that comes through? Well, every person, and especially cop, has a price. I'm sure that if you grease the palm of the sheriff's hand enough, he'll let you slide through. But if you can't convince the sheriff, and the sheriff checks your bag and you have contraband, you have to pay the price indicated on the card for each piece of contraband that you had in your bag. Not only that, but if you have any legal goods that you didn't declare, you also have to pay that price, and you don't get to keep them. So let's say I declare 3 bread, and I actually have 2 bread and an apple in my bag. The apple is technically considered contraband because I didn't declare it. So unless you're pulling 5 of a kinds every single turn, you're probably going to be lying about something. So back to the original question of why wouldn't the sheriff just check every bag? Well, if you're telling the truth about what's in your bag and the sheriff checks you anyways, the sheriff has to pay you the penalty. So as the merchant, you want to give the sheriff of Naughty Hands as little as possible to maximize your profits. And as the sheriff, you really want to grill people. And if negotiations aren't really going your way, you can always threaten to just open the bag. The game really opens up from here because you can really just negotiate anything. You can offer up goods that are in your bag, goods that you've already gotten through, money that you have in your stand, things outside of the game. I've seen people promise back rubs to their partners. It's hilarious. The only thing that you can't offer up are cards that are still in your hand. Negotiations officially end when the sheriff who nut in the Christmas ham either says, "You're free to go," or snaps open the bag. This is just such a satisfying thing to do and really builds suspense like no other game. Former promises, however, are non-binding, which means you can go back on your deal if it's another turn. Let's say I tell you, "Officer, if you don't check my bag this round, then I won't check your bag when I'm sheriff." Well, when it comes around back to me, and it's my turn to put the wife beater pants on, I don't have to consider that promise I made. To explain this further, why don't I call my guy who's an expert on beating wives in Nottingham? So what would you say the worst part of sheriff is?
Agreements are non-binding. Aeon said they wouldn't check my bag if I didn't check theirs. But when it came to their turn, they broke the agreement. They checked my bag. They lied.
You just gotta be careful. If you make any enemies, I'm sure they're not gonna be as willing to take your bribes in later rounds or games. Sometimes they won't even listen to you.
You never take my bribes!
Alrighty, so it's probably time we talk about the expansion. Usually, expansions just add mechanics that can make or break the game, and they're usually a toss-up, so I'm sure you want to hear about this one. Merriment brought in a way to make sneaking in the lower cost contraband, like pepper, worth it. Bam, that's it. That's literally all you needed out of the expansion, right? Because no one's gonna be bribing an officer, 10 coins or whatever, if they're only gonna sneak through like 2 peppers, which are only worth 6. It's just not worth it. When people could be sneaking in crossbows or royal goods, which count towards their stand, stuff like that, Before I started playing with the expansion, I would pick up a pepper and I would literally just discard it immediately. I would ruin one of the discard piles just by getting rid of whatever useless contraband I had in my hand. Especially pepper, since it's the lowest value and there's more of those things than I'm pretty sure any other card in the entire deck. It just wasn't worth it. I guess that the village of Nottingham just really liked bland food. So you're probably wondering how they made sneaking in stuff like pepper worth it. Well, that was by adding bounties or special orders. So the first person to sneak in a certain amount and type of goods, say 3 pepper, gets rewarded for it. And it's a lot of points. This also incentivizes not playing the goody two-shoes, "Oh, officer, I'm an honest merchant, I would never sneak in anything past you," strategy that kind of dominated the early years of Sheriff. Mostly because it just worked really well. Because if you were really honest early game, you would start out a bit slower than everybody else, but then sheriffs wouldn't be checking you if you're always telling the truth, because they're always gonna have to pay fines, which either lets you play contraband later and get away with it without having to bribe the guards because they'll just leave you alone, or they just have to pay you for the legal goods you're already bringing in anyways, which means you'll be getting a lot more money. So it's like a lose-lose for the sheriff to just leave people alone who are playing honest, or at least who are known for playing honest, especially early on. In the base game, if you're sheriff on the first turn, it's kind of nerve-wracking because you really just have to test the waters, both as a merchant and especially as the sheriff, because you need to know how far people are willing to go and to bet, and that sets a precedent for the rest of the game on briberies and everything. And it's pretty lopsided and unfair if you end up being the sheriff first or even second. So, you've played sheriff for years. What's your favorite thing that you've smuggled in?
Enough. I'm asking the questions now.
What?
I'm the sheriff.
What?
All right. What's in the bag?
What? Nothing, officer.
What's in the bag?
Nothing. Trust me, it's nothing you want. It's nothing you're interested in.
Got any contraband in there?
Absolutely not.
Yeah? Let me check it.
It's just some beans, officer.
Hand it over.
Okay.
What the fuck?
The expansion also boosted the player count up from 5 to 6, which was really necessary because who doesn't want more people sneaking in goods? That just makes the game longer too, which is good in this case because I really enjoy the longer games of Sheriff. And I think the art is really cool. Just the idea of like a nun who's like trying to sneak in goods is hilarious. I mean, seriously, if you're really going to get into like the acting as the merchant, it's really funny for a nun to have like 4 crossbows that she's trying to sneak in. That's just ridiculous. The expansion, Merriment, added Merriment Cards, which work a lot like Contraband, but they give you really cool abilities. You know, such as take a card from your hand and put it directly into your stand. I think the Merriment abilities are really cool and they shake things up. Since the only way that you can get more Merriment card is by sneaking a Merriment card into your stand, this puts a really big pressure on the merchant to try and sneak more Contraband in to get those abilities. But that also means that the sheriff is probably going to charge more to let you slide by, because it's more dangerous for the sheriff to let anything slide, because you could be hiding as a merchant, Merriment, multiple Contraband, you know, even legal goods you didn't declare, stuff like that. You could say, I have 5 bread and none of them be bread, and just have these ridiculously boosted cards. And as sheriff, you don't want that. If you could get Merriment without having to sneak them in, it wouldn't be that big of a deal, you know, but it raises the stakes for every single interaction that goes on, that it just makes the game uncomfortable the entire time that it's going. And since you have a 6th player now, it's going even longer. On top of that, depending on the player count, you can even add a deputy for the sheriff, which is basically a second sheriff. Merchants have to successfully bribe both officials in order to get through without risking getting their bag checked. This dramatically raises the price of sneaking in goods, because whatever you were paying one sheriff, you don't have to basically pay the other. There's no way that one is going to settle for less than the other. You know, negotiations are out in the open. It's a table-wide thing, so why wouldn't they want it to be even? The only way it's literally ever worth it is if you're sneaking in enough Contraband to meet a bounty and probably a Merriment on top of that. Unless you're getting like 30 points, there's no reason you need to dish out like 15 coins for those motherfuckers. I really dislike the deputy aspect. The only word I can describe for successfully bribing one guard and not the other is frustrating. It makes negotiations a chore, and I just tend to play without the deputy or even mention it if I'm breaking out the expansion. So the last aspect of the expansion I actually really like, and those are laws. Laws are selected by the sheriff at the beginning of each round. The sheriff gets 2 law cards and can read them aloud if they want, and then choose from the 2 that they want to enact. If you're the sheriff and you read them aloud, you're probably going to get a lot of suggestions and maybe even bribes to pick one law over the other, which I think is really cool. It influences play a lot, and you as sheriff can get even more for it. Because if the law is cheese is treated as contraband for this round and somebody has 5 cheese in their hand, they're going to do everything in their power to make sure you don't enact that law. It changes up a lot of core mechanics, and I kind of wish that the base game had the laws in it. Actually, a watered-down version of this is the fortune teller mechanic in Quacks of Quedlinburg. Except the fortunes are usually all positive in Quacks, whereas these can be negative or positive. Sometimes there are laws that'll give you extra money for only declaring 2 goods, something like that. I know I've already mentioned the deputies, but actually my least favorite aspect of the expansion is the rule book. This is so obscure and not straightforward at all. I remember first opening the box and reading out the rules and trying to explain what was going on in a group of 5 other gamers, and it just didn't fucking work. Honestly, I think I probably could have made up better rules for the game by just looking at the cards that were given and making rules up. It just straight up isn't helpful. It doesn't talk about any of the specific interactions you may have questions about, like the regular rulebook does. I'm actually going to close this section of the video out by giving some final thoughts and kind of wrapping up what all the components of the expansion are, so you don't get them confused with the base game and you kind of walk away with an idea of whether or not you would like to buy the expansion if you end up getting this game. The first one is extra player. Again, needed. It doesn't change the pacing of the game. It actually elongates a little bit, which I like a lot because this is a fun game as long as it's not lasting 2 hours. And the idea of like a nun smuggling in shit past a sheriff is hilarious. Or bribing a sheriff. That's even funnier. So for this one, I'm clumping together bounties, special orders, you know, black market cards, all that kind of stuff. They're all basically the same thing anyways. This is just what the game needed to balance the unholy amount of pepper cards in the game. If there are an infinite amount of cards in this game, there is an infinite -1 amount of pepper cards in the game. It is insane. They are everywhere. You cannot get rid of them, and this expansion capitalizes on that and makes them useful. I would actually like it if there were more special order or black market cards, because I feel like that mechanic is really cool and useful and actually puts pressure on the merchants that's not too extreme, like adding another deputy. I would also prefer if the rewards for each of these were actually worth less, because sneaking in 3 peppers and getting 27 points for it is absolutely insane and shouldn't be allowed. You can run away with the game if you get one of the bounties, let alone if you get 2. This also makes being sheriff in the first round pretty good, because people are always going to try and sneak in stuff immediately because they want the bounties, because they're so game changing. And you'll be willing to see and kind of set the tone for how much people are willing to settle for. So my advice is that if you're playing with the expansion, just check everyone's bag first round. Just do it. You're gonna get so much money out of it. I promise it's gonna offset it and you're gonna get something out of it. You literally have no reason not to. You can look down at the table and see what people are going for. Alternatively, you could trick the sheriff into think that you're trying to sneak in goods in the first round by looking at the bounties and picking up cards that the sheriff might think that you're going to try and sneak in, and then you don't, and then you get money for the sheriff checking your bag, and it's crazy because it keeps looping around. So laws. This is a really fun way to make a chaotic game more chaotic. Whenever I have the misfortune of role-playing the pig, I always like to read out the laws aloud to see if I can get any opinion or feedback or even bribes, and it's pretty nice also being a sheriff that people don't hate having to try and bribe. You know, if someone's like, oh, you should just pick that one, like, just do it, right? I'll be like, oh yeah, sure, why not? Like, I have no reason not to. Like, I'm the sheriff, I'm probably gonna check your bag anyways, right? Or at least try to. You would think that the namesake of the expansion would be the core aspect that, like, is really honed in and fine-tuned, but it's not. Again, having to sneak in Merriment to get more Merriment is really dumb. Just to reiterate, if you're playing with the expansion, I really dislike the fact that you're going to have to be bribing at least 1 guard in order to get Merriment through, so you can get another card that you're going to have to sneak through. It just makes the stakes way too high for the merchant, and there's no reason ever to play honestly when you have Merriment in play. These have such a low return in the expansion in conjunction with all the other mechanics that were added, I almost kind of want to forget that they exist. Okay, I gotta talk about the deputy again. ACAB, that's all I gotta say about it. I just hate it, I dislike it, I don't like what's going on there. I think it's horseshit. Next section. So these are all of the good aspects of the expansion, and these are all of the bad aspects of the expansion. I personally enjoy having the expansion because I'm kind of a board game collector, and I make these reviews, so I kind of had to have it, but that's up to you whether or not you want to do it. Ooh. Okay, fun part of the video. I've actually never gotten to talk about future or past editions, stuff like that, or which one you should get, but this is one I need to talk about because it has such an interesting history. So this game was originally a German game that I could not find the name of online when I was doing research for this video. The point of that game was sneaking goods across the border. That was pretty much it. I really don't know anything else about it. Then it was picked up by another publishing company, and it was called Robin Hood, which kind of gave it more of a theme, because I don't know if you can tell from my explanation, but the last one didn't have a theme. You know, like, what border? Is it German border, current day? Is it, you know, like a notorious, like, US-Mexican border, past day, present day? I don't know what's going on, right? So yeah, the publisher took the game, gave it the name Robin Hood, gave it more of a theme, and something that is much less controversial than making a game about sneaking goods across the US-Mexican border would have been. Then Arcane Wonders and the Dice Tower took Robin Hood, named it Sheriff of Nottingham, and that's the game that we have today and that I've been showing you this entire time. So let's say you're so swooned by this review so far that you paused it right before this section and went and tried to buy yourself a copy of it. While searching, you may have encountered a copy of the game online that looks a little bit different. This is the newest edition of Sheriff that's printed by just CMON. Originally, it was Arcane Wonders, Dice Tower, and CMON that were the publishers. CMON makes games like Rising Sun, whereas in the new edition, it's just CMON that made this. So why does it look so different? What's different about it, huh? I actually don't have a copy of this edition, so any footage you see is going to be courtesy of Board Game Geek or the Dice Tower, who, again, were the original publishers of the game. And what I mean by that was that Tom Vassell from the Dice Tower had this thing called the Essential Games List, you know, which is right here, it just says Dice Tower Essentials. And he convinced Arcane Wonders to pick it up and publish it, and every sale, you know, he got a little bit of kickback for, but then they stopped it. Arcane Wonders dropped it. It's still on the Dice Tower's Essentials list as far as I know, but then just CMON made the second edition of the game. So the art and design of the second edition are very, I'm not going to say bad, just different. The game plays the same way, and from what I've heard online, the game actually has huge translation errors going into any other language other than English. The pieces that I've seen of the second edition are somehow worse quality, which is really weird because, like I've mentioned so far, the components of the games, like the snapping bags, aren't all that great. I mean, come on. Come on. They've made games like Rising Sun that have fantastic components and miniatures even. Why can't they make a game that has good pieces? Not to mention the size of the second edition box is gigantic, like unnecessarily big. The first edition box was big enough, and now this one is like the big chungus of second edition board games. I don't know why I said that. I have a brain disease. It's called big chungal infection. Please help. So yeah, it's like unnecessarily big. The decision amongst elite board gamers, such as myself on the internet, is that the old version of Dog Killing Simulator Nottingham Edition is superior. The only thing that the Come On Edition actually has over the original game was that some of the Merriment components are in it. I don't even know which ones though, I couldn't even find that online. That's literally just word of mouth. I actually do not quote me on that, I have no idea. I mean, that's nice instead of being sold separately as an expansion, but like, is it worth it? That's up to you, really. Actually, this is something I haven't done in a video for a little while. At the time of this recording, here are the prices that I found from some cursory searches. So yeah, if you have a copy of the first edition of this game, or if you manage to find one for a decent price, hold on to it because it will soon be worth its weight in gold. Or, you know, like chickens or something. The second edition, as far as I know, and as far as I'm concerned as someone who enjoys playing a lot of different board games, is still worth getting if you don't have the game already. What really matters, as is with a lot of board games, but especially this one, is who you are playing with. With negotiations being the key mechanic, I cannot stress enough, you need to play with a good group of people. Don't play it with like some family members that you only see like once a year at a holiday. You know, you should play it with your friends because those are going to be the only people who can tolerate your bullshit. So I've actually never talked about stuff like this before in a video, I think, except for my last video, which was video game board games, where I talked about XCOM's companion app and how good that was. Well, Sheriff of Nottingham has a companion app. Sort of. Ever since Come On purchased the sole publishing rights to the game, the companion app has been taken off of both the Google Play and the App Store. Trust me, I looked. I couldn't even find pictures on this thing. If you didn't download it 2 years ago, you aren't getting a hold of this either. So come on over, sit on the carpet, and let old Octavian here tell you about the golden days of the Bastards of Nottingham companion app. So the app actually had official artwork that was layered very neatly behind the main menu. There was a timer that you could activate, and when you did, it started this background noise of a lively market, and you could argue with the sheriff in real time. And I cannot express how good of a thing that was because goddamn do some of these negotiations take forever. This also adheres to the theme and even puts pressure on the merchant, which I think is good for the base version because there needs to be more of that. Because even in the current day, if you're not able to bribe a guard quickly, you start to become suspicious. You could also keep score with the app and section everything off by legal goods and bonus cards and stuff like that. There is another companion app that kind of just exists out there that looks like somebody made for fun that's free to download that kind of works like this. The only issue is that it's mostly just a scoring sheet and it doesn't actually even split up the scores properly when you have ties, so I don't recommend that. I mean, the rulebook says that you're supposed to split ties by adding them up and then splitting them evenly by the people who are tied, and for some reason the app just can't do that. That's fine and all because the only app that I really ever use whenever I'm playing a board game is Score Pal. This is an app I recommend that everybody use. And if I were paid by Score Pal, this is where I'd put the ad placement because goddamn that was a smooth transition. So I actually talked about these two apps that I'm going to mention right now in my Bees unboxing, which if you haven't watched that, you can go ahead and do that. I did that on stream, so it's kind of shitty quality and didn't, you know, whatever. But it's a good video. You should watch it. Bees is a fun game, and I'm sure I'll be doing a review on that soon if someone would like to commission me. Anyways, the two apps that I'm going to talk about are Score Pal and Chwazi. Score Pal and Chwazi are a must-have for gamers, TM, everywhere. You can keep track of your play sessions by game and who you're playing with and how many points you got. It's really well organized. And in the event that we need to break a tie, instead of doing rock, paper, scissors or anything, we just use Chwazi. There you go. It's that easy. Again, like I said already, the companion app doesn't exist anymore, but back in the heyday of Sheriff of Nottingham, it was a must-have. Much like I did in the Wingspan video, I'm actually going to give out a list of complaints that I have about the game. Switching publishers was obviously a gigantic blow to Sheriff. It just didn't meet the demands that us elite gamers had for it. Since there are a fuck ton of cards, it makes setup and cleanup a lot longer to the point where I may not even want to bring out the game if I'm not willing to do all that kind of work. If you ever come across the unfortunate event of having to reshuffle the cards, you have to put the game on pause for like 20 minutes to make sure you're shuffling everything properly. It's really annoying. Again, it's just a gross amount of cards, and with all the nitty-gritty rules of how you draw cards, they really didn't need to make this many copies of all the same cards. It just makes zero sense to me on a large scale. Without even like a sand timer or something, it makes negotiations take forever. They tend to drag on and the game becomes very boring. This also causes game time to vary significantly. If I'm bringing this to a board game night and I want to play multiple board games, I'm either playing this very last so that everyone's ready to go afterwards, or I'm playing it first because I don't want to play what other games people brought. Board Game Geek and the rulebook even say that the average playing time is 60 minutes, but you could easily extend that to 2 hours if you're not paying attention to how long the negotiations are going on for. I already talked about the expansion and how bad the rulebook is, but what about the base game? It actually does a very good job at explaining all of the scenarios that can unfold ad nauseum. Seriously, this rulebook is really dense for a game that isn't all that complicated, where the most complicated rule is how you pick up your cards. Really? Why does it need to be this long? However, over-explaining in the base game is preferable to under-explaining in expansions. I will mention there is a nice index on the back that tells you exactly how much of what cards are in the deck and how much they're worth and whatnot. It's a really neat reference tool for when you first start playing the game. Sheriff of Nottingham inspires a really old-timey feel. My friends and I constantly refer to the game as Shrek because, let's be honest, that font was probably ripped straight from DreamWorks. Also, the name of the game is Sheriff, and I just hate talking about cops, so calling it Shrek is actually preferable. But the vibe is what really gets me. So, what would Shrek drink? Well, back in ye olden days, people drank beer, because it was, let's be honest, cleaner than water. I actually talked to the person who commissioned this, and we settled that Shrek would definitely drink New Belgium's Amber Ale. When it's slightly colder than room temperature, frothy, even in a glass maybe, it really sets the mood for you to yell at your friends and lie to their faces. I am giving Sheriff of Nottingham a 2 out of 5. Again, the hardest rule is how you draw and discard your cards. The cards, even though they are the crux of the gameplay, cause so much confusion when you add all these rules that really don't matter because there are a billion cards. You're never going to cycle through them anyways. Why does it matter that you have to put it on top of the discard pile? The solution is just have the discard pile be separate and then just leave the rest of the game the fuck alone. Or you can even include it that people can draw from that if they want. I don't give a shit. Just don't do it the way you keep doing it. There's just a much more efficient way to cycle through the cards if that's what you're trying to go for. There's so many copies of every card, it doesn't even matter if your opponent discarded a card that you may want because you could just pull it off the top by accident. All it really does is just slow down how you cycle through the 740 trillion cards that are in the game. I'm giving Sheriff of Nottingham First Edition with the expansion a 6.5 out of 10. This is one of the first games I really got into. Like I said at the beginning, I've had this game for quite a while. But this is a game that I would bring all the time to breweries, hookah lounges, house parties, stuff like that, get-togethers in the before times. Please God, let this end soon. So it's not a hard game, but it is a fun one as long as you're not tryharding it. Please do not try hard. Tryharding will ruin this game for you. Seriously. Just don't do it. Personally, I think the game is still worth getting, first or second edition. And the expansion actually adds a couple of good mechanics. So again, if you find them at a pretty good price, it wouldn't be bad to pick one up. But again, that's up to you. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. I know that you already know about the Ko-fi and the Board Game Geek list, even though they are updated frequently, so I highly recommend that you go check those out from time to time. I actually just updated my list for the holidays, so there's a whole bunch of new games on there, all this new stuff you can commission. You know, go check it out. I will add that I have been streaming a lot on my Twitch channel, which you may know me from, and my partner Jay recently did an art stream on there. You know, she does all of my thumbnails and my makeup. So if you want to check her out, I'll link her Twitter as well. You know, you should go check it out. She does commissions. It's awesome. I really don't know where I would be, you know, without her help. I don't do a lot of board game stuff over on my Twitch, but I do a lot of speedrunning and stuff like that. I mainly speedrun platformers for anybody interested, like Sonic, and I used to do some Mario games, and I have a couple of records in Human Fall Flat. It's a really fun time. It's a really different feel over there, so if you like my old videos, you know, before I started doing board game content, or you want more of some of that other stuff, or just looking for something new, I promise it's a fun time. I'll see you there, I hope. We even play fighting games and sometimes even digital versions of board games like Wingspan and now Terraforming Mars over there with a couple of people in the Discord server. It's a great time. And if you aren't a part of that, you can find a link to the Discord server in the description. This video, like I mentioned earlier, was a commission by Kerosene, who is currently in jail. She was charged with trying to bring in Pumpernickel into the Bean Kingdom.
Hey, thanks. So I commissioned this video so I'd have evidence for my trial. And I didn't even really know there was pumpernickel in my bag. You guys believe me, right? You can get me out of here. My execution is set for tomorrow.
We're all about immersion here on the channel, and since Sheriff is about bribing your local authorities, I invited my own cop over to test it out.
Get on the ground, you're under arrest.